Namaskaram, Tony Parra here. Vinyasa yoga. It's a term that I hear and see all the time. It's used as a class title. Some teachers even use it as a description for the style of yoga that they teach. But when we take a closer look at the word vinyasa, one way that it can be broken down is into the prefix vi, which means variations, and then there's the suffix nyasa, which means within a certain set of rules or parameters that are to be followed. So we have plenty of variations of vinyasas that we can do, but vinyasa, as the breakdown has revealed, has certain guidelines. In other words, it's not just doing whatever pose you want and then throwing a chaturanga dandasana, urdhva mukha svanasana, and a adho mukha svanasana in between those. Now, to do this is absolutely fine, and it's what a lot of people are looking for in a class. I do that purposely too, but I'm not under the idea that I'm teaching a vinyasa class. Our venturing away from vinyasa's initial meaning is certainly bringing a great deal of confusion as to what vinyasa really is. You see, we now have a modern conception of it, and we have collectively applied a new meaning to this word, a meaning which is now understood and used not just here, but globally, India included. The same thing has actually happened with the chakras, but that's a whole other can of worms. So historically, vinyasa, as applied to yogasana, because the word vinyasa is used in most of the arts, it's a variation within a structured form. So just like there are texts and traditions which have passed down the structures of music, the guidelines for vinyasa in the yogasanas, they can be found within a number of the shastras, the sacred texts. Even the Yoga Sutras even give some of the foundational vinyasa structures, if you know what to look for. But either way, we don't seem to really use them much these days. I remember when I first started teaching asana, I was pretty strict on the vinyasas, and people, they just weren't really into it, just because of preconceived notions of what yogasana was, I believe. But I think that now we're getting to a space where people are starting to acknowledge that there may be more to this postural side of the practice than just a mindful form of exercise. This is the direction that I guide people towards in our private sessions. I may speckle some fancy poses in there just to keep them entertained, but eventually I'm wanting to get them to use these asanas as a deliberate practice to help facilitate spiritual awakening and liberation. Now, if you ask most vinyasa teachers what the word vinyasa means, more often than not, they just don't know. It seems very strange, right? But it's actually happens in many professions. There are doctors out there that don't know what the word doctor means. It actually has origins that just means a teacher. Now, just imagine how different things would be in this world if all the doctors took on this role, this responsibility as teachers. Well, I feel the same exact way about teaching yoga. And many of the secrets are contained in etymology or in the words themselves. So what I'm trying to say is that it's really beneficial to know what the words mean. So for yogis, that means little by little, just trying to understand more and more Sanskrit words, especially the most foundational of terms, right? Oh, and learn their pronunciations as much as possible too, because it does matter how you say these things. I'm always trying to figure out more and more about how to pronounce things. For instance, in Spanish, you could say Feliz Año Nuevo, or you could say Feliz Ano Nuevo. They sound pretty much the same to the untrained ear, but the first one, Feliz Año Nuevo, says Happy New Year, whereas Feliz Ano Nuevo says Happy New Anus. I see this type of thing in yoga all the time. One insidious example is when I hear teachers speaking about the heart chakra. Many teacher training schools teach that it's called the Anahata chakra. Well, it's actually Anahata chakra. When you say Anahata, it means unstruck, right? It's untouched, not hit, it's not wounded. Whereas Anahata is saying wounded, the wounded chakra. Even worse, there was a teacher who once told me that Anahata is saying wounded by use of a double negative, that it's really saying not wounded. Now just imagine trying to go through a whole text without understanding some of these type of subtleties, and the effect that could have on your understanding on what and how to practice. You might end up practicing something just completely different than what was originally intended. I just opened up a huge topic here, and one that I'm certainly not the topmost authority in, you know. I don't know the proper pronunciation of many English words. I know less Spanish words and even less Sanskrit words. But I do study and work with Sanskrit daily, and I keep learning more and more, and can certainly help out the great majority of you. Unless you're like a Sanskrit scholar or come from one of the few villages that still speak Sanskrit, both of whom I know will see this video, and many of you have really helped me with my understanding. Now, if you want to get some of these small details that can really make a big difference in the approach that you use to practice yoga, you can always reach out to me. One of the best ways to dive into this work is by joining the yoga intensive. And we have one coming up in High Point, North Carolina on July 14th. I'll just post that information somewhere in the comments. But if you really want to get an even larger dose and dive super deep into these topics, I'm currently in the process of setting up my first yoga teacher training program that is open to the public. Before, it was only through special invitation. So if that interests you, just let me know, okay? I really hope that some part of this video strikes a chord and inspires some of you to just keep diving deeper into your yogic studies. Namaskaram. Om Tatto Dvandvana Vigataha Om Hring Namah Shivaya.